my self-awareness journey began in association with God, with Great Spirit. I didn't have a particularly religious, I had more of an anti-religious approach to relationship, much more of a spiritual, a new age influence came into me, and an esoteric influence that of plant medicine, which really opened my journey up. And so at 19 years of age, I entered my university life as a monk, whereas my peers were learning accountancy and law and whatever they were doing. I was living as a monk. And so I was training to become a priest. And that's how I saw my future. And where that all came crashing down for me was that I realized that for me to have a relationship with an entity, a consciousness, a being, an all-encompassing being outside of myself, I needed to have that same relationship with myself. Although this polarity of father sky, if I don't know who my father is out there, up there, it became apparent to me that I needed to ask the question to my mother, because she knows who's my father. So I stepped out of this ascendancy culture of spirituality and saw that I needed to have a connection with a fellow human being. And so I began a life of marriage. It was
not with me.
No, it was
Twisting the tail.
Yeah, it was a very strong awareness that I can't continue in this farce, this pretend of relating with something outside of myself when I am still struggling to relate with a fellow human. So really, my relationship with God would only ever be present in my relationship with a fellow human, or it could be an animal or the tree, but the human connection was most strong for me. And so it was a realization from being a monk that now is my time. I'm here to enter marriage, to enter full commitment with a partner. And that was 20 years of married life. So it's had a big influence on me, being a man dedicated, committed, and somewhat convicted, self-convicted, into a process. And I own that. And it's strengthened me. It's made the man that I think was most attractive to my present partner, Kahu. That I was a man that had the ability to commit to a woman. And that's her story. I'm sure she'll go there of how she saw all the fuck boys and all the boys at the festivals that were super cute and could sing a beautiful song, but they weren't someone you'd want to trust in being able to look after you. And this is still an ongoing dynamic. I think that we're journeying with this struggle of rebalancing our polarity. But that's further down the track. We'll conversate about that, I'm sure. So I was married for 20 years, raised 4 kids, and paid off the mortgage, and did all those right things. And I did it on a whim. I think this is a significant part of my story. I essentially achieved in the feminine. I went down a journey of yin spirituality, of trust and surrender, and getting in touch with my feelings as a conscious man. And somehow or other, on a whim, I paid off the mortgage and I raised a family. And I've come to realize that there's a significant imbalance in my life, that I haven't balanced out my whole being with the masculine counterpart. And you've heard it from me before that the most spiritual thing I did last year was buy a watch. And I laugh at that. I think there's such Zen wisdom in that for me, that the most spiritual thing I've done is buy a watch, so that I can manage my time, so that I can become thoughtful. In advance, I can look outside myself to the care of my fellows, and be thoughtful, provide and protect. So that's a big piece in my journey, is balancing out this excessive feminine in my consciousness and bringing in a balance of masculinity. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're...
No, that's great, Free.
Okay.
And I feel like, as I said before, we could have a whole podcast of each of your individual stories. And I guess the focus for today is really looking at this piece of relating. And you mentioned it in speaking about the relating ship, which is kind of trademarked by you guys. And I guess we're going to dive into that a little bit more. But before we do, I would love to hear a bit more on Kahu's pre-relating ship relationships.
Sure, Shay. It's interesting. I see Free and I at opposite ends of the spectrum when we met. He had done fully committed 20-year life sentence, life journey, with another and all that entails. And I had been for 20 years gypsying around the world, festivals, and living it up actually, and trying many flavours of the world, if you like. Being a lover and being okay with that, not feeling like like I was less because of that. But actually realising through that journey that obviously there was some major commitment issues. I was happy to meet travellers whose visa was finishing in 6 months. So I knew there was an out. I wasn't going to get locked in for years, and I didn't want to be married and have a white picket fence and a house and all that sort of stuff. That wasn't my thing, and I was very clear from the start with these beautiful lovers along the way and dear friends who I'm still very close with. So we came from different ends of the spectrum, really. And, I'd turned 40 and I kind of had this sort of an epiphany of a voice almost, it was within, sharing, like, it's time. It's time to kind of like, you've done all the, floating around and running away and playing around, all that. It's time to get real now, girl. It's time to grow up and look at these issues of commitment and trust in men, and so I was also hearing from deep within that I'm ready for a deep, heartful, soul-felt union to help me with all of those aspects, and that's when I met Free. Yeah, and interestingly enough, we met at a festival. We were blindfolded. We were doing a workshop, and it's a long story, but
it's a beautiful story.
Yeah. So
you shared it with me at a wedding as well. It was just such a touching story to hear. So please share.
Oh, we were there in this workshop. I was actually madly crawling along the side of the tent walls trying to get out and thinking, I don't want to be here anymore. I just want to disappear. And the lady's saying, right now everyone should have walked around and found a partner by now. And I hadn't, and he hadn't. And, she's obviously seeing everyone. And then finally, we came across each other's hands, and it was just this beautiful sense of recognition of bodies knowing each other. And there was trust, and there was, a curiosity and a willingness in me. And I was like, wow, I kind of stopped in my tracks. And then, obviously she says, take off the thing, and I took it off, and so it was this guy who I had deemed as being a bit of a player around the festival. He wasn't. He was just being himself, But, all my fears were there. And long story short, diving in to the fears. And here we are, 8 years later, still working on all our things and finding some amazing gold along the way, and feeling that that's relevant for others, and having the reflection from others like yourself many times saying, wow, thank you for what you're diving and going through that's helping us. So here we are.
That's amazing. I really appreciate that. And for those of you that are listening in and watching, some of our close friends and family, you'll probably likely know Kahu and Free are from Pranafest perhaps, or the Zentai community, and you're often bringing people together. And this is an element that I really notice and appreciate in your lives, is that you are very authentic and transparent and real around your relationship, as well as supporting others, and having this approach, like you just said, that you don't necessarily have it all worked out, but you're more than willing to dive into the darkness and the uncertainty, and particularly the unknown, which, beautifully said, is frightening for all of us. And oftentimes it's easier to look away and avoid it and not face it. But that's the honourable element, I feel, in your relationship. You've done that individually, but you're doing together. And that's kind of what I was speaking to as a pioneer. You're spearheading that for the community in a sense too, so that we can also reflect on that and learn more about ourselves and our relationships. And that's something extremely incredible that I think is worthy of discussing and exploring and sharing. And so here we are today. And I wanted to focus on that point. You had mentioned a heartful, soulful, sacred union, which is a beautiful language to put towards what's possible in coming together in a relationship. But what would you say is some of the hurdles or challenges or difficulties? Because we all face challenges in our relationships on some degree. I don't think anyone has it necessarily all worked out.
Absolutely.
But for you guys, being together for the last 8 years, we don't necessarily have to go into the details, but perhaps sharing maybe something that has been a sticking point, and then perhaps how you've been able to navigate through that.
Yeah. Well, I think I can, I feel clarity on the hurdle, the ongoing hurdle, and the many hurdles within that hurdle. In short, I mentioned previously that I had been on a journey, a personal growth journey that was via what I refer to as a yin spirituality. It was an excessive emphasis on the feminine, on surrender and trust and feelings. And it wasn't balanced with the plan and the courage versus the vulnerability. And so I'd knee-jerk reacted against masculinity because I saw it as what people refer to as toxic or shadow. And so I'd knee-jerk reacted and was quite anti-society and establishment. I didn't want any part of what I didn't relate to. So the biggest hurdle was, for me, in relating with Kahu, is that I met Kahu when I was a free, floating gypsy,
hippie
boy, I was a boy. I was a man I was a boy who had raised a family and paid off a mortgage, and I was still a boy.
And I met Free when I was a fiercely independent, wild woman doing my own thing. It was my way or the highway.
Yeah, but really a young girl.
Totally.
And and we were both childlike looking back, and still are. That's the reality.
And I hope we stay a bit childlike for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, but there's an immaturity component in that childlike state that I'm referring to, that I'm being really honest and open about, that I haven't learned yet. I haven't evolved yet into the man that I know that I can be, that I sense that I actually am, beyond all the conditioning and trauma wounding and what have you. So that's the biggest hurdle for me, is that I've been progressively coming out of a feminine consciousness in a man's body, and confronting and dancing with a woman who's very much
coming out of the masculine and wanting to surrender into the feminine, but having to work on trust and commitment to do so.
So the battle that we have is because we're acting out that conditioned part of ourselves that that I'm not happy with anymore. I don't want to be in that disembodied state of a feminine expression. I want to actually stand in the body that I have. I want to drive the vehicle that I have.
Can I share a picture? I often see it like we need to eject. I need to eject the hardware. That's the masculine. Software, yeah. Eject the software of the masculine for me and give it to him. He needs to eject his trust and going with the flow way for me to, So we're kind of in the process of this and have been for these last few years, and it's not easy when you don't have the software inserted.
I think it's very clear that much of the attraction I had to Kahu is that she has the skill set that I want for myself, and vice versa. Okay,